We have our next speaker for the day, Mr. Ipsit Bibhudarshi. Mr. Ipsit is an alumnus of Xavier Institute of Management Studies and is now currently working as Zonal Service Marketing Manager for Maruti Suzuki India Limited. As a digital marketing enthusiast with prior experience in IT industry, he aims to provide innovative solutions. Apart from being an author with leadership experience, he's been trained in pro bono consulting and has been a freelancer in graphic designing. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Ipsit Bibhudarshi to share his insights on the theme for the evening. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And we have an insightful session till now. And we're listening to the other esteemed panelists about the discussions of the monopoly companies, of the choice of power, the power of to choose what we want to use, the power of influence of those companies on the citizens and the customers and the consumers as a whole, as well as the surveillance part that was covered by the previous speaker, and also the awareness factor that we should have. So just building upon all of those things, I would be focusing on how this topic of technology and democracy impacts us individually, because these are two terms which are very much connected to our everyday life, right? Democracy is something, our voice that is heard upon by the government in some or the organizations in decision making. Technology is something that we all, each one of us, use on a daily basis. We spend with technology nowadays more than we spend with our families, and therefore the concern, the worry, the scarcity of the technological freedom that we have is of utmost significance that need to be addressed upon. So the first step that we need to do is to be aware of it and to address it, and which we are doing it in the present session. Before going further and discussing how both are at crossroads of each other, whether both are helping each other out or both are just an obstacle to each other's progress, let me share you a very personal story to you all. There are two stories that recently happened with me, and I hope that it will also resonate with you all, or you must have faced this kind of situations as well in the past. So recently I connected with two of my ex-colleagues, and they were my schoolmates as well, and we were planning for a trip because we have not met with each other since long. And because of this situation, we thought that we'll just go out somewhere with all the social distancing guidelines and keeping the sanitization factor on. And we're just discussing that after all this vaccine things gets over, we will go to Nepal or Bhutan, and we will have a good fun weekend and come back and join back into our corporate life. You'll not believe, exactly after half an hour, I, along with two of my other friends, kept on receiving notifications from various apps, softwares, and sites about the travel plans, about the itinerary, about the restaurants that we can try out in Nepal and Bhutan, and other such things. So, seeing at one perspective, it's a good thing because it's helping us to choose. But seeing in a different perspective, just think of it. You are talking personally with your friends about a plan that is yet to be materialized, and yet you are receiving the notifications from those organizations just because those conversations, those data are already with them. So this is something to really ponder over, because this should make us aware, if nothing else, that how data, how the big techs have already entered in our life with or without our consent. The second example just happened to me today morning. I have been following the WhatsApp versus Signal issue since last few days. And the first thing that I observed in today's WhatsApp story is WhatsApp justifying itself that they don't invade privacy through putting up stories in their own chat box and in the chat box of the customers or the consumers. So this is a thing to worry, right? We don't want to see WhatsApp justifying itself, because if it doesn't invade our privacy, it doesn't have that in its policy, they should be convincing enough. They don't have to put it up in newspapers, they don't have to put it up in WhatsApp stories and as such. And one thing that is very significant in all these things, just because Elon Musk tweeted about Signal, the Signal share grew manyfold. This is the power of technology, because it can reach to maximum people, and it can also shake a company like WhatsApp to its core, and they have to take decisions based on the sentiments and the consumer or public opinion as well. The second example we can consider, it's not a personal one, but what I've been studying since last few days is about the results of the US elections and its aftermath. So a lot of things can be related or can be attributed to the social media, to the Twitter, to the Facebook handles, on instigating people either positive or in a negative form. As discussed by Dr. Harshvardhan in the beginning, whether it was right or wrong to ban the president of the one of the biggest democracy of the world just because he tweeted something is something else to discuss altogether. So in my perspective, it may not be that democratic way to handle it. They may say it's under their policy, but is it really under their policy or they changed it on the go? If the such a powerful person can be banned by putting up for his points, so can't we be banned for putting up our points, which doesn't match with the social media monarchs that are there in the world? This is again something to ponder over. It may be a good thing for some, it may be a bad thing for other people, but this is constricting our viewpoints on reaching out to the targeted audiences. The third example that I would like to use is about our e-commerce sites. We have an esteemed panelist from an e-commerce site as well as the food aggregators. This is the part where the infiltration of the data that we use are in a positive way. If we order something from Zomato, if we order something from Flipkart or Amazon, we get similar recommendations. So this is a good or a positive usage of the data that we put forward for the companies. So it is a two-way sword. It can be used in a positive way. It also will not be used in a positive way. It impacts the election of a biggest democracy, and also it impacts our holiday plans as well. So it's a very big spectrum that we're discussing about, and we have to narrow it down and see how it affects us in our day-to-day life, how it affects us as management people, as future leaders. You all attending, we all working in corporate will be going further, planning the strategy of our organization. So it is very imperative for us to understand this situation so that we doesn't do such things in which we are against of. Before going on further, let me first define these two very important words which we are discussing today since the beginning of the session, that is democracy and technology. Because knowing exactly what democracy is and what technology is, we can actually understand how they are at crossroads, whether they are helping each other out or whether they are obstructing each other. So democracy is anything which helps the citizens or the customers or the consumers to engage among each other and put forward their points. So whenever the customers, the citizens, the consumers are stopped from putting forward their points, that's the thing to worry. That's something that we should be very careful of. So democracy is about coming together, putting our voice forward, may it be for selecting the ruler of the country, may it be in placing a product that we like, or may it be a service that we'd like to avail from a particular organization. Now, what is technology? Now, technology can be language, technology can be a medium in which we portray our opinions, our views, or else I would rather say technology is like a child, always curious, always ready to grow, always very uh, energetic to go forward without any inhibition. But what happens when you leave that child without a parent or without parents? It becomes out of control. It's the same thing that can happen with technology. If we leave it to some parents who can do their monopolistic attitudes toward their technology, or we just leave it in open without any control or balance, that is the point when the mishap starts happening. That is the point we should be worried about. So that is the point we should be taking care of, that yes, we cannot live without technology, but we should be aware of it, and accordingly, as per our power, as per our capabilities, we should handle it in a similar fashion. One of the very important factor that we keep on discussing, and also with the personal story of mine I try to point it out, is about the social listening and the surveillance. In a time like this, the pandemic time, we have been giving data to the government, we have been giving data to various organizations, just thinking that it would keep us safe in future. If the vaccination drive has started, it would reach us fast. If the hospitalization process would be smoother, then we need to give it data. So this fear also has provided us this opportunity for the organization to pull this data from us and keep a constant surveillance for this whole duration of the last 1 year that we are facing the pandemic, and we are not giving it a second thought, because this concerns our health, this concerns the health of our family. So this is one thing we should be careful of, that how much data we are giving to a third party, how much data we are keeping with us. This is all in a single, as someone pointed out, that it just depends on us. We can just switch off our phone, we can just go out of the app, we can just uninstall the app, and the data sharing can be stopped. That's the best way that we can do. But what if we need to use that app? What if we need to use that Google map, but still we know that we're going to share that? Are there any ways to fight it? Of course, there are certain ways. We're going to discuss how we can have a balance of both. We're going to keep using that app as well as being aware of it from social listening, where most of our private data would not go to that company. With my example, when I discovered that the apps and softwares are listening to our conversations and suggesting restaurants and other places of itinerary of the places that we are going to visit, I discovered that there's a feature in Google Voice and there's a feature in Facebook where you can switch off and the social listening part can stop. So this is something that generally people are not aware of or don't bother or don't care about it. So if you're aware of that thing, we can definitely restrict at least some amount of data reaching to the servers of those organizations. Because every time we say yes without reading a document of any WhatsApp software or any softwares like WhatsApp or any other apps, that is the time we are ready to share the data, because we think we don't have anything personal or private to share. We are not running a nuclear program. Let the data go to them. But ultimately, what goes around comes around, and that comes to us as a targeted medium, as a targeted advertisement, focusing on the products, on the services that they are going to push us in buying. So there is no problem in targeted audience, targeted advertisement or targeted push. But the problem arises because it hampers our viewpoint of a bigger picture. We don't get to see other options if we keep on getting targeted advertisements or targeted messages to us regularly. Only if we get a bigger picture, then the democracy things comes in, then the choices comes in, then the discussion comes in, and we can discuss it about and then move it forward. So the big having an awareness of the bigger picture is very important, along with all the targeted things that is thrown at us. Now, the main major problem statement about democracy and technology is how they are in conflict with each other, whether they are helping each other, whether they are helping to reinvent it, or whether they are crushing each other. Democracy should be a meaningful and intentional participation of all the citizens and the consumers at various forums. May it be like a forum like Paramarsh, may it be a forum of virtual conversations in Facebook, Twitter, or other such mediums. We should be aware and we should be welcoming all the viewpoints of various people, and then we should consider what to do next. So then the democracy can be upheld, then the democracy can go along with the technology. Now, another major question comes whether the technology is empowering the democracy or the technology is killing the democracy. Now, how does it empower? It empowers, if you see from a government perspective, it certainly empowers because beforehand, the government was not aware of what each and every individual is thinking about their governance, about their rule, about their policies. But nowadays, they are aware of it from the social media that the citizens are thinking like this. If the government decides to use it in a good way, then they can improve upon their governance and the citizens will be happy. If they decide to go and sell this data to a third party for the profit of that organization, it's a different story altogether. Similarly comes to the private organizations or corporations who sell service or product. I am from a service background, and we keep on interacting with customers day in and day out, listening to their feedbacks, listening to their worries, listening to the uh, good gestures and their encouragement, everything. So we need to sort it out, and we have to utilize it in a good manner. If we utilize it to provide a better service or a better product as management people to our customers, then it's good enough. But if we utilize this to change the decision of the customers or the consumers, the way we think, then again it's a thing to worry about. So it's all about decisions that we take personally, how we handle those data, because data will always be there. And again, as pointed out, data is like oil. It's very rich and it's very powerful, and it can be malinated in a very strong manner. It's very malleable. So it depends on us how to shape it. It's generally mentioned that technology should be like a good guiding light and not like a chariot. It should guide us towards success. It should guide us towards doing something good for the society as a whole, but it shouldn't be the major factor in driving the business or driving the profit. Now, one may argue that every organization is based out of profit and the revenue it makes. So how can we ignore that? So I'm not saying about ignoring the profit, but the major thing that is focused here is focusing on the consumer base of the any organization. The strategy that is made by any organization should be made based on the consumers' feedbacks, sentiments, and public opinions. That will ultimately lead to the profit, that will ultimately lead to the revenue generation without hampering the privacy of any individuals. Now, a healthy democracy is something that we all like to make it happen that yes, we should live in healthy democracy. Now, how would that happen? Now, healthy democracy would only happen when each one of us individually participate in the discussions, would understand the severity of the issues, would be aware of the situations that we're going through. So one of the major factors, the action point that we as individuals should do is having knowledge on multidisciplines or multidisciplinary knowledge. So sometimes we say that we are from operations background, we are from marketing background, so we don't need to understand political science, we don't need to understand IT, taxes, tax laws, we don't have to understand the acts, the IT Act, the Section 65 of IT Acts and all those things, but those are actually very much necessary for us to understand and be aware of. Because as future leaders, as someone who would define the strategy of your organization, it is very much essential for you to understand these laws, these mandates that every organization has, every government has, and work under it. In that way, we can uphold the democracy in the best possible manner. So one thing that I always am aware of is that we, not if not wittingly, we almost willingly allow the organizations to take our data. If we receive a call from a customer call center, we don't hesitate to provide our name, our telephone numbers, our email ID, of course, not our financial details, but other details, thinking that that may help us in getting a better product or getting a better service. But are we aware that how this data is going to be used? Whether that is going to be used for the purpose they're taking it from us, or whether they're going to use data in a completely different way that will affect us negatively in the future. It is something that we have to be very aware of. And that is where the citizens need to be very digitally literate, as pointed out by the earlier speaker. And by that way, we can drive and we can control at least some amount of data that is going from us. Or else we will be keeping, or else the organizations would keep us calling about the services they provide, and also they would keep us selling those data to not so much positive companies who can hamper the democracy as a whole. We discussed about the companies taking monopolies and crushing other companies. So this is something as business leaders also we have to take care of. We always go for healthy competition. We would always get a choice in our career when we can decide whether to crush our competitor or let them grow and then healthily defeat. So there are two very different terms, sound similar: crushing your competitor and defeating your competitor. Crushing your competitor is what monopolistic companies do by various forcing methods, but defeating is by healthy competition, by putting value, as mentioned by Deep India as well, that putting value of a startup or putting value of a company, then simultaneously many companies can exist, providing various values to the customers or the consumer base, because the customers are the king and they always have various requirements. And it is never like that that one company is required to cater to the needs of the customers and the company cannot enter. They can definitely enter, but it depends on how the other company forces their policies, or how they can acquire. Most of the companies, they also have the acquisition on smaller companies and they embed into them. So how that we can stop in future, that also depends on us, because we will be going and being a part of any company would face in our lifetime this situation, this dilemma, whether to go for the profit, would go for the revenue, or would go for the democracy or democratic situation. We're discussing it today, we're going to face it tomorrow. So that is something we need to decide. And that decision would be impactful only if we are aware of what we are doing, only if we are aware that how our actions as management students, as management leaders, is affecting the common people and the citizens in using the product or service. That is of primary importance of now. Now, no technology is inherently bad or good. It is how we control it. So it's again depends on us individually, how we control this technology. Government needs to have policies and mandate which can enhance the privacy of individuals. That's on government side. All the organization needs to not share the data with third party who can hamper our day-to-day life. That is on government side, on the organization part. But on our part, we need to be aware how we are utilizing the technology, and we have to be very aware that that doesn't hamper anybody else with the usage that we're doing, or with the service that we are providing, or with the product we are making. So there's a very important fact that we need to embed among them, among us, and that takes time to understand, to be aware, and have that culture inside us to go further and serve the people, serve the citizens on all our capacity, but understanding the importance of this very topic of the democracy and technology. Another one, the very important thing that we need to do is not take out the human factor from any strategy that we make for any organization, because generally numbers, profit, and revenue, as we discussed, comes into forefront, and we forget about the people who are responsible for that revenue, and that's the humans. So that human factor should be there in everything that we are doing. That will only lead us to have a healthier democracy, because when once we focus on the human factor, we start listening to their feedbacks, we start listening to their concerns, and not only listening but acting upon it, and considering their viewpoints and opinions in a good way is also important. The viewpoints of other people are also um, very important, and we may not agree to those, but it's also important to consider their viewpoints, and by that we can uphold our democracy in a good way. So this is all from my side. Over to you.
Thank you, sir, for such intriguing thoughts. And we've actually come to know how important it is and how aware shall we be as citizens to make sure that technology is not misused, and how democracy ensures that technology is not misused. So now I'd like to open the ground for questions, if there are any. Guys, you may raise your hands or post the questions in the chat box. Yes, sir, we have a question from Ankit.
Yeah, I can read it. If social media is used to allegedly spread fake news or create disharmony, then there is an outcry to ban the people concerned. But if such an action is taken, there is an outcry that democracy is violated. Okay, so how to tackle such a situation? See, it's a very tricky situation when someone posts something that can incite people to violence, that is against the policy of every organization, and that should be stopped. But that has to be there within the policy of that organization, and that should be discussed upon, that whether those posts that have been made actually hampers the democracy, actually has incited the people, or whether the people have just taken it as an excuse of inciting the violence that is talked upon. That is very important to discuss upon, and not immediately take a decision and ban someone. Maybe anyone, maybe any one of us, because opinions may vary among people, so it may differ. Your opinion may not be similar to mine, my opinion may not be similar to other people, but that shouldn't stop us or shouldn't make us ban someone immediately. Yes, if it is found out with proof that that has led to that insight and led to the violence of a people or place, that can be taken care of. But if it is not, so it should be given time, it should be discussed upon. What is my viewpoint on this? Because free speech is always encouraged, but along with free speech, what is encouraged is again the discussion about that free speech, about that particular topic. I hope it's clear to you, Ankit.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So much, sir, for your time.
Now it is the time to welcome our fifth speaker of the day, Ms. Niharika Singh. Niharika Singh has been associated with Infosys for the past 10 years and currently works as Senior Principal in Organizational Development. Prior to this, she has worked in HR strategy, research, and transformation in her previous organizations in retail and